So you've probably heard of dead internet theory, the idea that no one you interact with online is a real person. They're all just bots trying to sell you something. Things aren't quite that bad, but they're pretty bad. Fake accounts run by corporations or political interests that pretend to be just plain folks have rendered the internet almost unusable. But what you might not know is that it all started with this. The practice of using fake accounts to make a politician or a product seem more popular than they actually are is called astroturfing. Simply put, astroturfing is a fake grassroots movement. Its name comes from a brand of artificial grass that started appearing in sports arenas during the 1970s. It's cheaper to maintain than real grass, but athletes have mixed feelings about it. Experts who study astroturfing describe it as top-down activity that mimics bottom-up activity or coordinated, inauthentic behavior. The first astroturfing campaign is generally thought to be the 1909 campaign against the Tin Dipper. Now, if you know anything about America during the 1800s and 1900s, then you know that they did a lot of weird stuff. And they kept on doing the weird stuff even after it was pointed out to them that what they were doing was insane. Because, well, that's just how we do things around here, son. The Tin Dipper was one of those things. The Tin Dipper was a public drinking cup, and those are three words that should never go together. If you were at school, out shopping, or waiting for a train, and you got a bit thirsty, you could go over to the water fountain, the public jug, or in some cases, the public trough. Take the Tin Dipper off the hook and get yourself a drink. If you're now wondering whether or not the Tin Dipper was a disease vector, well, hell yeah, it was. The Tin Dipper definitely contributed to the spread of diseases like typhoid, diphtheria, tuberculosis, and even syphilis. Anyway, the Tin Dipper was objectively nasty, and eventually there was a popular movement to do away with it. Here's the thing, though. That popular movement was the brainchild of Hugh Moore, co-founder of the Public Cup Vendor Company, which today is known as the Dixie Cup Company. In 1909, paper cups had been around for a while, but they weren't really widely adopted because, why use a paper cup when you can just give yourself diphtheria? Moore wanted to stir up demand, and his primary tool for doing that was the Cup Campaigner. The Cup Campaigner described itself as a militant little paper published at intervals by persons striving to banish that most prolific medium for spreading disease, the public drinking cup. While Moore's name did appear on the publication's masthead, at no point did he mention that he personally stood to make millions off the abolition of the Tin Dipper and the adoption of a disposable alternative. And the Cup Campaigner went hard, as the kids say these days. They would run gut-wrenching stories about children whose lives were cut short by the Tin Dipper. They would disgust readers with lurid descriptions of the diseases lurking in the era's fashionably luxurious facial hair. And somewhat problematically, they would imply that the Tin Dipper was exposing society's upper classes to diseases best confined to the working poor. But most importantly, the Cup Campaigner gave you, a concerned citizen, information about how you could join the fight against the public health scourge that was the Tin Dipper. There were sample letters that you could send to newspapers and politicians in your area, advice on how to organize a public demonstration, talking points that you could use to recruit your neighbors, activities for kids, and even sample legislation that you could respectfully submit to local lawmakers. If you've watched any of my earlier videos, then you've probably recognized by now that the Cup Campaigner was designed to exploit several heuristics and our innate desire to belong to a group or movement. And I'm linking to those videos up here somewhere. Did it work? Boy, howdy did it ever. Moore's sales skyrocketed. Campaigning in favor of paper cups became linked in the public mind to science and progressive politics. Businesses, eager to show that they were not slaves to custom and ignorance, rushed to install Moore's vending machines in their shops, at no cost to themselves, of course. Moore claimed that his success was due to a groundswell of public support, a groundswell that he himself created. Now, I am not defending the Tin Dipper here. Like I said, that thing was objectively nasty. But there are some people who think that this was America's first step towards a disposable throwaway culture. I think that's debatable. I also don't want to drag Hugh Moore too hard here because he did go on to work pretty tirelessly in the cause of international peace. But there is no debating that he wrote the playbook for nearly every AstroTurf campaign that would follow. And some of those had far darker objectives than simply getting the diphtheria spoon out of your kid's school. AstroTurfing has been used for everything from union busting to climate change denial, and it's important to note that nearly everybody does it. By the 1980s, AstroTurfing had become big business and a core service offered by many PR agencies. Some of the biggest names in PR owe their success to their skill in AstroTurfing. 40% of Fortune 500 companies engage in or have engaged in AstroTurfing. And even local businesses get into the act when they spam review sites with one-star reviews of their competitors. It's incredibly effective, and few industries have AstroTurfed harder than the tobacco industry. In 1929, Lucky Strike cigarettes wanted to get more women to start smoking. The problem was that society at the time frowned on women smoking. So Lucky Strike decided they were just gonna change society, like you do. To accomplish this, they turned to a man named Edward Bernays. Now, Bernays was a saucy guy, and also the father of modern public relations. He's literally one of the hidden architects of the modern world, and I'll probably be talking a lot more about him in future videos. To help his client get more women to start smoking, Bernays took a page from Hugh Moore's book and worked to connect smoking to progressive politics in the minds of the public. Women had won the right to vote just 9 years earlier, and the fight for women's rights was still raging in American politics. Actually, it's still raging in American politics, but let's stay on topic. Bernays worked with Vogue magazine to recruit New York City's hottest debutantes and it girls, and had them march down Fifth Avenue during New York City's famous Easter parade, brazenly smoking Lucky Strikes, which he had dubbed Torches of Liberty. The press ate it up. But here's the thing. The public face of the campaign wasn't Bernays or Vogue magazine or even a New York City it girl. It was just regular gal and concerned citizen Edith Lee, who just happened to be Bernays' secretary. By the way, when I was researching this episode, I read a lot of accounts of the Torches of Liberty March, and almost none of them mention Edith Lee, which is wild. Even when we're talking about something horrible, we erase women from history. During the 80s and 90s, the tobacco industry turned again to AstroTurfing to combat legislation restricting smoking in public spaces and banning tobacco advertising. They formed groups like the National Smokers Alliance and then lavishly funded them, and the memberships of some of these groups grew to the hundreds of thousands. But it wasn't easy. In that pre-social media dark age, the industry had to rely on armies of college kids with clipboards who fanned out into bars and bowling alleys across the nation to recruit smokers to their cause. Those kids had to be trained, which was time-consuming and expensive. They needed campaign literature to hand out, and creating that was time-consuming and expensive. Sending out mass mailings was time-consuming and expensive. Sending actors and company employees to disrupt local town hall meetings on smoking was time-consuming and expensive. For all of AstroTurfing's upsides, it was a complex endeavor that required skill and persistence. That is, until social media came along. The advent of social media saw those armies of college kids with clipboards replaced by elite squads of content creators. The hard work of traveling around the country to recruit local thought leaders was replaced by simply starting a Facebook group. And the actors and interns who they used to send out to disrupt town hall meetings were replaced by the modern AstroTurfer's most important tool, the sock puppet. A sock puppet, simply put, is a fake online identity that someone assumes to make their opinion seem more popular than it actually is. They've been around for as long as there's been an internet. Writers would use sock puppets to promote their books. Trolls and fan forums would use sock puppet accounts to gang up on other members and win arguments. They were only dangerous to the extent that getting caught running a sock puppet account it's pretty embarrassing. But like everything else on the modern internet, the sock puppet has been weaponized to an insane degree. These days, a modern AstroTurfer can run thousands of sock puppet accounts, essentially becoming an AstroTurf movement of one. Of course, no one can be expected to maintain thousands of fake identities online without screwing up. But fortunately, the AstroTurfer can turn to the persona management software industry for help. Persona management software is exactly what it sounds like. It helps you keep all your fake identities separate, makes sure they all have their own voice, and keeps you from making dumb mistakes like posting a picture of some juicy barbecue on an account that's supposed to be run by a strict vegan. On the sources page for this video, I have linked to a rather infamous services tender for persona management software that was issued by the United States Air Force. It's important to note here that the purpose of modern astroturfing isn't always to promote a policy or product. Quite often, they're using all this technology to simply spread doubt among their opponents or to divide and conquer a rival group. One of the more advanced astroturfing tactics is the sock puppet fight, in which an astroturfer will have two or more of his sock puppets get into an argument in order to raise anger and suspicion among the human members of the group. This has far more serious consequences than simply killing the vibe. Everyone online these days is talking about the 3.5% rule. That is, it takes only 3.5% of the population to successfully resist an authoritarian government. At 3.5% of the population, your movement is now large enough that it likely contains friends and family members of government and law enforcement officials, making them more likely to refuse orders or in some cases even defect to the opposition. But the bad guys know that rule too, and they know the best way to keep the opposition from reaching that threshold is to get the opposition to start fighting amongst themselves. They used to have to do this by infiltrating the opposition with undercover operatives who would paralyze the movement with nonsensical debates or, worse yet, encourage violent actions that would give the state a reason to crack down. Now, all they need is money and a guy with a bunch of phones. So, astroturfing. Everybody does it. It exploits our need to belong. Its goals can be opaque. And along with everything else, AI is making the problem worse. I've made another video about that too, which is also linked up there somewhere. And it's probably even more widespread than you think. In 2021, the Swiss Federal Technology Institute of Lausanne found that 20% of the top trending topics on what was then called Twitter were the product of AstroTurf campaigns. And it all started with this. I generally like to end my videos with some helpful tips about what you can do about whatever awful thing I'm talking about, but this time, I got nothing. While researching this video, I reached out to an expert in the field and asked her what we could do about this problem, and she basically said she was open to suggestions. There are ways to spot an AstroTurf campaign, but an AstroTurf campaign that you can spot is probably a pretty bad AstroTurf campaign. There are a few telltale signs to watch out for, such as multiple posts with similar phrasing, or sudden spikes in likes, upvotes, or downvotes for a particular post, content creator, or a group. Modern AstroTurf campaigns tend to go after individuals rather than issues, so if you see a lot of posts attacking someone who exposed wrongdoing and not discussing the actual wrongdoing, you might be looking at AstroTurf. If you suspect someone is a sock puppet, you can check their profile and see if they have any friends or followers. You can see if they post on any other social media platforms. Once upon a time, you could do a reverse image search on their profile picture and see if it was a stock image or something like that. But with the rise of quality generative AI, that tool is becoming less useful. Other things to look for, is their language unusual? Do they repeat slogans? Do they speak in marketing terms or use inflammatory language like you would see in a propaganda campaign? Do they only post in one or two groups? If you belong to an online community that you want to protect, just about the only useful advice I can give you is make sure your community is a real community. Make some actual friends, talk about something besides the news once in a while, and bond in a meaningful way. This will help make your group more resilient against attempts to break it up. And learn how propaganda and disinformation work so you can tell when someone's trying to manipulate you. Good luck. Links to all the sources and elements that I used to create this video are available in the description. And if you've seen any examples of astroturfing or something that you think might be astroturfing, share it in the comments. Thanks for watching. You can buy tin dippers on eBay, like antique ones, if you want one.
No, I'm good.
I'm pretty sure they wiped all the diphtheria off.
It's been enough years for it to die.